The topic of today's discussion is the ancient Greek tragedian Aeschylus and his famous play, The Persians. Among the handful of Greek playwrights which emerged during the Athenian Golden Age, Aeschylus has been widely regarded as the father of Greek tragedy. This is so on account of having expanded the amount of characters on stage to allow for a theatrical dialogue between characters, rather than a strictly between the chorus and a single character. Virtually all of the extant tragedies of Aeschylus are unanimously recognized as insightful and didactic renditions of contemporary ethical concerns into inspirational drama. In particular, the theme of Aeschylus's tragedy, The Persians, exemplifies tradition by highlighting the personal hubris of Xerxes, which ultimately culminated in the Persian Wars and drastic consequences for his empire. The Persians is the only surviving tragedy which doesn't concern itself with a distant mythological setting. In showcasing the wealth and power of the Persian army before delivering a messenger's eyewitness account of their tragic loss at Salamis, followed by a stern diatribe by Darius and the return of his son Xerxes in rags, Aeschylus draws a string of contemporary historical events together to forge a tragedy more powerful than any dramatic rendition of distant mythological events. Aeschylus's use of contemporary events provided a clear message to all the Athenians about their own growing power and pride. Those who reach too far are destined to tragic ruin. What is unclear and heavily debated by scholars, however, is whether the play as a whole is to be understood as sympathetic towards the conquered Persians, or as a patriotic celebration of Greek victory within the context of an ongoing war. Just as modern readers with various sensibilities draw on different interpretations of the play, it is doubtful that reactions from the Athenian onlookers would have been homogeneous. So, in light of this, today I want to, as usual, propose that both arguments are equally valid, if not irrelevant, to the greater purpose of Aeschylus's tragedy. The Persians was a public caveat to an ever-growing Athenian power, centered on the theme of hubris, as to ensure that they themselves are not overtaken by the same imperialistic arrogance which led to the tragic defeat of the Persians. The question which has plagued scholars over the past century has ultimately divided Aeschylus's work into two diametrically opposed interpretations. These scholars have endlessly debated whether the modern reader is to regard the Persians as sympathetic to the sorrows of the Persians, or as a theatrical monument of the triumph of Greece over barbaric invaders. The first of these interpretations extends a degree of pity and compassion to the troubled chorus. It puts attention on the maternal anguish of Atassa, and it presents the herald as awestruck by the calamity of defeat. It sympathizes with the disgrace of Xerxes. The second debated interpretation has recognized some of these aforementioned aspects, but presents them as merely secondary to an emboldening theme of national victory, whereby Greece overcame a foreign tyrant despite impossible odds. According to one scholar, this latter understanding presumes a gloating Athenian audience would have glowed as they listened to their own praises, more significant in the mouths of Persians in distant Susa, the capital of the Persian Empire. Through Xerxes' own words, Aeschylus seems to have anticipated the Athenians' pleasure upon hearing reports of Persian losses. To fully tackle this problem, it's vital to formulate a clear understanding of the setting of the special occasion of the Persians. Due to an inextricable link with recent historical events, this specific play demands that scholars should develop a thorough understanding of the Athenian mindset. This group, however, like any other in history, was far from ideologically homogeneous, thus making any broad generalizations concerning mass reaction dubious. Just 8 years prior to the performance of the Persians, the Athenians had beaten back the invaders from the east and averted the threat of foreign tyranny. Nevertheless, the Achaemenid Empire was still a threat, and it wouldn't be another 4 years until the victory on the Eurymedon drove Persian threat from the coast of Asia Minor and subsequently from the Aegean Sea. Athens, at the head of the Delian League, was still involved with taking back Greek lands which had Medized. Aeschylus's choice in using the vanquished Persians as his dramatis personae wasn't entirely by choice, but rather due to precedent. The playwright Phrynichus had staged the loss of Miletus and suffered a massive fine for reopening the emotional scars of his audience. Under such political conditions, Aeschylus could carefully develop and truly explore his dramatic abilities by showcasing the hated barbarians as dignified and worthy of compassion, just as Homer had extended sympathy to the Trojans. It's worth noting that key elements of Aeschylus's script were corroborated with Persian sources, and Aeschylus used all methods possible to make his audience forget they were hearing Greek to, quote, create a Persian soundscape. Such methods include the use of proper names, cacophonous catalogues, imitation of foreign vocabulary, cries, interjections, repetitions, and anaphora designed to suggest barbarian diction, ionicisms lending to Eastern feel to the language, and epic terms. Ultimately, whether or not the Athenians were going to laud the accounts of the slaughter or extend their sympathy, they were to witness a contemporary production of a classical theme, the punishment of hubris, brought on by Greek hands. Though it may have been too early for Aeschylus to truly know, it wouldn't be a far stretch of the imagination to believe that the, quote, old soldier had some foresight and understood the direction in which Athens was headed with the Persian state so heavily debilitated. By 472 BC, the Persian wars had yet to end, though Xerxes himself had offered to make a handful of humiliating concessions which Athens was inclined to accept despite Themistocles' oppositions to peace. In this light, the political undertones of the play must be considered. With his vivid descriptions of the disastrous effects of an obstinate arrogance, and by imbuing his audience with compassion for the vanquished Xerxes, Aeschylus was clearly displaying contempt toward the perpetuation of war. In due course, the punishment against hubris was universal and ordained by the gods. No empire could last forever, and each would fall as a result of the excess inherent in the act of empire building itself. One scholar claims the images evoked by Aeschylus's drama imply that naval hegemony, the form of war built upon it, the power derived from it, and most of all, the delusions of conquest and justice it supports, can be perilous to the polis. In historical retrospect, Darius's speech against imperial excess echoes as an eerie warning to the Athenian leaders of the Delian League, which would soon come to be understood as the de facto empire of the Aegean Sea. Let no one scorning his present fortune ruin his prosperity in the desire of others, proclaims the shade of Darius in the chastisement of his son Xerxes, whom, quote, the cunning deception of God had caught in its inescapable web. In rejecting an interpretation of the play as a crudely patriotic celebration, it may be said that Darius attributes the Persians' defeat to fate rather than superiority of the Greeks, thus proving Aeschylus passed up on an opportunity for gloating. The theme of hubris is ubiquitous throughout the play, although it manifests itself in a variety of ways. Throughout the tragedy, there are numerous passages which reveal Persian misunderstanding between the quantities and the qualities of their empire. As a result, the Persian confusion between mere control over vast riches and armies versus leadership, moderation, and discernment is made clear. R.P. Winnington-Ingram holds that Aeschylus was, above all things, quote, a dramatist of ideas, of religious ideas. It may be said that the greatest sins in the Greek mind involved the rejection of the four cardinal virtues: justice, courage, and, most importantly, moderation and prudence, all of which had been overlooked by Xerxes and could rapidly be seen fading in the minds of the Athenians. Aeschylus was clear that ignorance toward the divine preordinations against empire led to a form of spiritual sickness and had led to the collapse of Athens' foremost foe. In the power vacuum left behind, it's that same spiritual sickness, or hubris, which would transfer itself into the heart of the Athenians along with the hunger for power. While scholars have tied themselves in knots over seemingly trivial things, they've lost sight of the heart of the tragedy itself, in which Aeschylus gives a stern and religiously buttressed warning. Though prosperity itself, such as the Athenians had known for some time, didn't give rise to disaster, it was rather an inherent jealousy of the gods which led to the building of all empires, whereby men drunk with power hold themselves among the gods before being cast down by the providence of Zeus. Morally, the Persians is a case study of imperial hubris in black and white, lacking in any subtlety. Its message is direct, its theme is poignant, and unlike the Oresteia or the Danaid trilogy, the victims of Zeus's providence are thoroughly guilty and deserving of their punishment. To Aeschylus, it may only have been a matter of time until the burden of guilt was passed over to the city which he loved the most. Nevertheless, the old soldier could rest assured in the fact that they hadn't carried on unwarned.